That afternoon changed everything. The moment my mother-in-law's face twisted with rage, I knew nothing would ever be the same. My name is Delilah Monroe. I'm 34 years old, and what I'm about to tell you still makes my hands shake when I think about it. It happened at Sunday dinner, a simple family gathering that turned into the worst moment of my life. Francine, my son's grandmother, the woman who had smiled at my wedding and promised to love me like her own daughter, picked up a bowl of steaming hot soup and threw it directly into my face. The burning hit me first, then the shock, then the sound of her voice cutting through the chaos. "You deserve every drop of that." I stood there frozen, soup dripping down my cheeks, my skin screaming with pain. And the worst part wasn't the burning. It wasn't the humiliation of having 12 family members watch me get scalded at a dinner table. The worst part was my husband, Marcus, the man I'd been married to for 8 years. The father of my son just sat there. He didn't jump up. He didn't grab napkins. He didn't ask if I was okay. He looked at his mother, then at me, and said, "Maybe you should leave, Delilah." My heart didn't break in that moment. It shattered into a million pieces that scattered across that expensive dining room floor along with the soup and my dignity. But here's the thing nobody expected. Not Francine, not Marcus, not a single person sitting at that table pretending they hadn't seen a thing. I wiped my face with the linen napkin. I stood up slowly. I picked up my purse, and then I took out my phone, dialed a number I'd saved 3 weeks ago, and said 3 words. "It's time. Now." Then I walked out of that house with my head held high. Nobody followed me. Nobody asked where I was going. Nobody cared. But they would. Oh, they would care very soon. Because what I did with that phone call changed everything. It exposed secrets that family had buried for years. It brought down walls they thought were unbreakable. And it showed them exactly who they'd been underestimating all along. To understand why I made that call, I need to take you back. Back to when I was just a girl from the wrong side of town who fell in love with a boy who seemed like a dream. Sometimes we trust the wrong people too much. Have you ever been disappointed by someone you loved? Tell me your story in the comments. I want to read it. I grew up in a small apartment in East Atlanta. Nothing fancy. Cracked linoleum floors, radiators that clanked all night, neighbors who played music too loud on weekends. But it was home. My mama worked 2 jobs cleaning houses for rich folks in Buckhead. She'd come home smelling like bleach and expensive perfume that wasn't hers. "Delilah," she used to tell me while braiding my hair at night, "you're gonna do better than this. You're gonna have a life I couldn't give you. But remember where you came from. Remember who raised you. And never let nobody make you feel small." I held on to those words like a lifeline. I was a good student, worked hard, got a scholarship to Georgia State, studied nursing because I wanted to help people, wanted to do something that mattered. I worked night shifts at the hospital while taking classes during the day, slept maybe 4 hours a night, survived on coffee and determination. That's where I met Marcus. He came into the emergency room one Tuesday night with a cut on his hand from a kitchen accident. Nothing serious, just needed a few stitches. But the way he looked at me while I cleaned his wound made my stomach flip. "You've got gentle hands," he said with a smile that could melt ice. "It's my job," I replied, trying to stay professional. "No, it's more than that. You actually care. I can tell." We talked while I worked. He told me he was finishing up his MBA at Emory, that his family owned a chain of car dealerships across Georgia, that he'd never met anyone quite like me before. I should have heard warning bells. Rich boy from Buckhead interested in a nursing student from East Atlanta? Come on, Delilah, think. But I didn't think. I felt. Marcus was charming. He brought me flowers at the hospital, took me to dinners at restaurants where the menu didn't have prices, made me feel like the most special woman in the world. 3 months into dating, he took me to meet his mother. Francine Aldridge lived in a mansion. I don't use that word lightly. The woman had a literal mansion in Buckhead, with columns out front, like something from Gone with the Wind. A circular driveway, a fountain, staff that opened the front door before you even knocked. I wore my best dress that day, a simple blue one I'd bought on sale at Macy's. I thought I looked nice until I saw Francine. She stood in the foyer wearing pearls and designer everything. her silver hair perfectly styled, her eyes scanning me from head to toe like I was a stain on her marble floor. "So," she said, not bothering to extend her hand, "you're the girl from the hospital. Not, 'Nice to meet you.' Not, 'Marcus has told me so much about you.' Just, 'The girl from the hospital.' Yes, ma'am. I'm Delilah Monroe. It's lovely to meet you." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure it is." Dinner that night was uncomfortable. Francine asked questions that felt like interrogations. Where did my family come from? What did my parents do? Did I have any debts? What were my long-term intentions with her son? Marcus sat there smiling like everything was normal, like his mother wasn't treating me like a suspect in a criminal investigation. When we left, I told Marcus how I felt. "Baby, she's just protective," he said, kissing my forehead. "Once she gets to know you, she'll love you. Everyone does." I wanted to believe him, so I did. We got married 2 years later. The wedding was beautiful. Too beautiful, honestly. Francine planned the whole thing. She picked the venue, the flowers, the cake, the guest list. I got to choose my dress. That was it. "It's her gift to us," Marcus explained when I questioned it. "Just let her do her thing. It makes her happy." So I let her do her thing. And slowly, piece by piece, I started disappearing. The first year of marriage was good. Not perfect, but good. Marcus worked at the family business. I kept nursing. We bought a house in Marietta. Modest by Aldridge standards, but it was ours. Then I got pregnant. The moment I told Marcus, everything changed. His eyes lit up. He spun me around the kitchen, called his mother immediately. "Mama, we're having a baby." Francine arrived at our house 2 hours later with a folder full of recommendations. The best OBGYN in Atlanta. A woman who delivered all the important babies. The right prenatal vitamins, imported from Switzerland. A meal plan designed by a nutritionist she'd hired. "You need to take care of that baby properly," she said, handing me the folder. "The Aldridge name carries weight. This child will represent our family." I stood there holding that folder, feeling like an incubator instead of a mother. But I kept quiet. I smiled. I said thank you, because that's what I always did. I kept the peace. I swallowed my feelings. I told myself it would get better once the baby came. My son was born on a rainy September morning. We named him Julian, the most beautiful boy I'd ever seen. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a cry that sounded like music. When Marcus held him for the first time, tears streamed down his face. "He's perfect, Delilah. We made something perfect." In that moment, I believed everything would be okay. I was so wrong. Francine took over from day one. She showed up at the hospital before I'd even finished recovering from delivery. Brought her own baby blankets because ours weren't quality enough. Hired a night nurse without asking us. Started talking about which private schools Julian would attend. He was 12 hours old. "Don't you think it's a bit early for school talk?" I asked weakly from my hospital bed. Francine looked at me like I'd said something stupid. "It's never too early to plan for success, Delilah. But I suppose you wouldn't know that." The insults were always subtle, always wrapped in a smile or a helpful suggestion. But they cut deep. Every single one. Over the next few years, Francine inserted herself into every aspect of our lives. She had opinions about everything. How I dressed Julian, what I fed him, how I disciplined him, whether I was working too much, whether I was home too much. There was no winning. And Marcus? Marcus never defended me, never told his mother to back off, never saw a problem at all. "She just loves Julian," he'd say whenever I complained. "She wants what's best for him." "What about what's best for me?" I asked once. He looked at me with confusion, like the question didn't make sense. "You're his mother, Delilah. What's best for him is best for you." But that wasn't true. What was best for Francine's vision of Julian wasn't best for me. It was killing me. Slowly, day by day. I started feeling invisible in my own home. My opinions didn't matter. My feelings didn't matter. I was just the woman who'd married into the Aldridge family and produced an heir. The turning point came when Julian was 5. Francine decided she wanted Julian to spend summers with her. A whole summer. 2 months away from me. She presented it to Marcus, like it was already decided. The boy needs culture, she said at dinner one night. I'll take him to Europe. Show him Paris, London, Rome. Give him experiences you simply can't provide. She looked directly at me when she said that last part. I felt the rage building in my chest. 2 months without my son? Letting this woman take my child across an ocean to fill his head with God knows what? No, I said clearly. Julian stays with us in summer. The table went silent. Francine's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? I said no. He's my son. He's 5 years old. He's not spending 2 months away from his parents. Marcus, Francine said, turning to her son. Talk to your wife. I looked at Marcus, waiting, hoping, praying he would finally stand up for me. He cleared his throat. Delilah, maybe we should discuss this. My heart sank. There's nothing to discuss, I said, my voice shaking. Julian is not going. Francine stood up from the table. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with fury. You know, Delilah, I've tried. I really have. I've tried to welcome you into this family. I've tried to help you become something worthy of the Aldridge name, but you make it impossible. I don't need to become anything, I replied. I'm already somebody. I was somebody before Marcus, and I'll be somebody after. The words hung in the air. I couldn't believe I'd said them. Neither could anyone else. Francine smiled that cold smile. We'll see about that. She left without another word. And that night, lying in bed next to Marcus, I knew something had shifted. The battle lines had been drawn. But I had no idea how far she would go. While I tell all this, I wonder where you are listening from. Write the name of your city in the comments. Things got worse after that dinner. Much worse. Francine started a campaign. That's the only way I can describe it. A calculated, systematic campaign to push me out of my own family. It started small. She'd make comments in front of Julian about how busy I always was with work, how tired I looked, how maybe Grandma's house was more fun than home. Your mama works so hard, she'd coo to him. She doesn't have time to play like Grandma does. Julian started asking to visit Grandma more often. He'd come home talking about the swimming pool, the game room, the cook who made him whatever he wanted for dinner. How could our normal house compete with a mansion? Then she went after my marriage. Marcus started working later, coming home distant, not interested in talking, not interested in anything, really. When I asked what was wrong, he'd say he was stressed. Work stuff. Nothing to worry about. But I worried. One night, I found him on the phone in the garage. His voice was low, secretive. When he saw me, he hung up immediately. Who was that? Just work, he said, not meeting my eyes. I wanted to believe him, but something in my gut screamed that he was lying. Around this time, I noticed money missing from our joint account. Not huge amounts. A few hundred here, a few hundred there. When I asked Marcus about it, he got defensive. I needed some cash. What's the big deal? The big deal is you didn't tell me. I don't need permission to spend money, Delilah. I'm the one who earns most of it anyway. That comment cut deeper than he probably intended. Or maybe exactly as deep as he intended. Our marriage was crumbling. I could feel it. But I didn't know why, and every time I tried to talk to Marcus about it, he shut me down. Then I found the texts. It was an accident. Marcus left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered. It buzzed, and I glanced at it without thinking. The message was from someone named V. Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place? My blood ran cold. I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I scrolled through the messages with growing horror. There were hundreds of them. Flirty messages. Explicit messages. Plans to meet at hotels, at restaurants, at a condo downtown I'd never heard of. But the worst messages weren't the romantic ones. They were the ones about me. She still doesn't suspect anything? V had written. No clue, Marcus replied. She's too focused on Julian to notice what's going on right under her nose. Your mom was right about her. Clueless and clingy. Tell me about it. Once the papers are ready, I'm out. Papers? What papers? I kept scrolling, my vision blurring with tears. And then I found the truth. Marcus wasn't just having an affair. He was planning to leave me. He and this woman, whoever she was, had been working with a lawyer his mother had hired. They were building a case to take Julian from me. The messages spelled it out clearly. Francine believed I was an unfit mother, too focused on work, not providing the proper environment for an Aldridge heir. She had witnesses lined up, character testimonies from people I'd never even met, documentation of every time I'd worked late or left Julian with a babysitter. They were going to take my son. My son. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. I walked to the bathroom on shaky legs. I turned on the water so Marcus wouldn't hear me. And then, I fell apart. I cried so hard I thought I might die. My whole body shook with the force of it. Everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd endured, it meant nothing. To them, I was just an obstacle to be removed. But somewhere in the middle of that breakdown, something else happened. Something shifted. The crying stopped. My breathing steadied. And a cold, clear feeling washed over me. They wanted to take my son? They wanted to destroy my life? Fine. Let them try. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. I spent the next 3 weeks gathering evidence. Every text, every email, every financial record I could get my hands on. I was careful, methodical. I didn't let on that anything was wrong. At home, I smiled at Marcus like nothing had changed. I let Francine make her snide comments without reacting. I played the perfect, clueless wife they thought I was. But behind the scenes, I was building my case. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Patricia Hollins, who came highly recommended by a divorce attorney I'd contacted secretly. She was expensive, but I had savings Francine didn't know about. Money I'd put away from every paycheck for years, just in case. My mama always said, "Keep something for yourself, baby. Something nobody else knows about. Because you never know when you'll need to run." Smart woman, my mama. Patricia got to work immediately. Within 2 weeks, she had photos of Marcus with his girlfriend. Her name was Victoria Chen. She worked at the Aldridge dealership, been having an affair with Marcus for over 2 years. But that wasn't the bombshell. The bombshell was Francine. See, I always assumed Francine hated me because I wasn't good enough for her precious son. Because I came from nothing. And she couldn't stand that. But the truth was much darker. Patricia discovered that Francine had been orchestrating everything from the beginning. She introduced Marcus to Victoria. She encouraged the affair. She hired the lawyer to build the custody case. She paid for the condo where they met. Why? Because she wanted Julian. Not Marcus, Julian. According to documents Patricia uncovered, Francine had been planning this since my son was born. She believed she could raise Julian better than I could. Shape him into a proper Aldridge. Mold him into the heir she always wanted Marcus to be, but never was. Marcus was just a pawn in her game. A weak, spineless pawn who'd do whatever his mother said. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't about Marcus falling out of love with me. This wasn't about me not being good enough. This was about a woman so obsessed with control that she was willing to destroy her own son's marriage to get what she wanted. And what she wanted was my child, over my dead body. But I had no idea what was coming. I thought I understood how cruel Francine could be. I thought I'd seen the worst of her. I thought gathering evidence would be enough. I was wrong, because what happened next proved that Francine Aldridge wasn't just controlling. She was dangerous. The Sunday dinner invitation came through Marcus. His mother was hosting the whole family, he said. Aunts, uncles, cousins. A big gathering. She specifically wanted me there. "She's making an effort," Marcus said with that fake smile I'd learned to hate. "We should show up. Be a family." I knew something was wrong. Francine never made efforts toward me, but I'd been waiting for an opportunity. I had my evidence ready. My lawyer was on standby. I thought maybe this was my chance to confront them with witnesses present. So I agreed to go. Walking into that mansion felt different this time. I wasn't the nervous girl trying to impress anyone. I was a woman walking into enemy territory, armed with truth. 12 people sat around that long dining table. Francine at the head, naturally. Marcus next to her, various Aldridges I barely knew scattered around. And me, placed at the far end like an afterthought. Dinner started pleasant enough. Small talk, compliments on the food. Francine playing gracious hostess. Then she stood up, tapping her crystal glass with a fork. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," she announced with that practiced smile. "Family is so important. Blood matters. Loyalty matters. And tonight, I want to address something that's been weighing on my heart." She looked directly at me. My stomach dropped. "Many of you know my grandson Julian, the light of my life, the future of this family. And many of you have watched me try to embrace the woman my son chose as his wife." Her smile hardened. "But there comes a time when we must protect what matters. When we must speak truth, even when it's difficult." "Francine?" Marcus started, shifting uncomfortably. "Quiet, Marcus." She didn't even look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on mine. "Delilah, I've tried to give you chances. I've tried to help you become something worthy of this family. But you've made it clear you have no interest in rising to your position." "My position?" The words came out before I could stop them. "What position is that? Doormat? Punching bag?" Gasps around the table. Francine's eyes flashed with fury, but her voice stayed calm. "You see? This is exactly what I mean. The disrespect, the constant fighting, the selfishness, always putting yourself above the family. I put my son first," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "There's a difference." "Your son," she repeated, like the words tasted bitter. "Let me tell you about your son. Julian is an Aldridge. He deserves an Aldridge upbringing, not whatever trailer park values you're trying to instill in him." The room went deadly quiet. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. In front of everyone, with no shame whatsoever. "You should be thanking me," Francine continued. "I've been patient, generous even. But patience has limits. And after tonight, things are going to change, one way or another." She picked up a bowl from the table. The soup course. Steaming hot seafood bisque. "Francine, what are you—" Someone started. But before anyone could move, she walked toward me, her heels clicking on the marble floor. I stood up, backing away. "Don't you dare!" She didn't stop. "You think you can take my grandson from me?" she hissed, her composed mask slipping. "You think you're smart enough? Strong enough? You're nothing. You were nothing when Marcus found you, and you'll be nothing when he leaves you." Then she threw the soup. The burning was instant, searing pain across my face, my neck, my chest. I screamed. The bisque was scalding, and the spices made the burning worse. Through blurred vision, I saw her standing there, satisfaction written all over her face. "You deserve every drop of that." I waited for someone to help me. Anyone. Someone to hand me napkins, to call 911, to do something. Nobody moved. And Marcus, my husband, the father of my child. "Maybe you should leave, Delilah." Those words broke something inside me. The last thread of hope I'd been clinging to snapped. But in that moment of total devastation, something else emerged. Something hard and sharp and absolutely done playing nice. I grabbed a napkin from the table, wiped my burning face, stood up straight, and pulled out my phone. "What are you doing?" Francine demanded. I dialed the number. It rang twice. "Hello? It's time, now." I hung up, looked around at every face in that room, every person who had watched a woman throw boiling soup at me and done nothing. "You're all going to regret this," I said calmly. "Every single one of you." Then I walked out. Behind me, I heard Francine laughing. Good riddance. Finally, some peace. She had no idea what was coming. The night air hit my burned skin like ice. I walked to my car on autopilot, my face still dripping, my hands shaking. But my mind was crystal clear. The phone call I'd made wasn't to the police. It wasn't to my lawyer. It was to someone who'd been waiting for this moment just as long as I had. My mama. See, 3 weeks ago, when I first discovered Marcus and Francine's plan, I didn't just hire a private investigator. I called the one person who'd always had my back. The one person who knew what it meant to fight for your child. "Baby, you tell me what you need," Mama said when I told her everything. "I've been cleaning houses for rich folks my whole life. You think I don't know their secrets? You think I don't have friends who know things?" My mama had spent 30 years cleaning mansions in Buckhead. She knew everybody. The housekeepers, the nannies, the cooks, the gardeners. The invisible people who saw everything, and said nothing. Until now. When I said, "It's time," Mama knew exactly what to do. She activated a network I didn't even know existed. Women who had worked for the Aldridge family for decades, women who had witnessed things, women who had stayed quiet because they needed their jobs, but who were tired of protecting people who didn't deserve protection. But that wasn't all. See, I'd also learned something during my weeks of investigation. Something that changed everything. The Aldridge family fortune? It wasn't as solid as everyone thought. Patricia, my private investigator, had dug deep into the family finances. What she found was shocking. The car dealership chain was hemorrhaging money, bad investments, shady deals, loans that couldn't be repaid. Francine had been hiding the truth for years, maintaining the illusion of wealth while the foundation crumbled. But here's where it got really interesting. 10 years ago, Francine's husband died. Harold Aldridge, patriarch of the family. His will left everything to Marcus, but with conditions. The money was in a trust that Francine controlled until Marcus proved himself capable of responsible management. Guess who got to decide when Marcus was capable? Francine. She'd been using that power to control her son for a decade. Every time Marcus tried to make a decision she didn't like, she'd threaten to withhold his inheritance. The house we lived in? Technically owned by the trust. The cars? The trust. Marcus's job at the dealership? He answered to the board, which answered to Francine. My husband wasn't just weak, he was trapped. Not that it excused anything he'd done, but it explained a lot. And Victoria, his girlfriend? Patricia discovered she wasn't just a random employee, she was Francine's goddaughter. A woman Francine had groomed specifically to replace me. Someone she could control as easily as she controlled Marcus. The whole thing was a web, and Francine sat at the center like a spider, pulling strings. But webs can be torn down, and spiders can be crushed. I drove straight to my mama's house that night. A small duplex in College Park. Nothing fancy, but clean and warm and full of love. When I walked through the door, Mama took one look at my burned face and started crying. Oh, baby. Oh, my sweet baby. She pulled me into her arms, and for a moment, I let myself be a child again. I let her hold me while I sobbed into her shoulder. Then she pulled back, looked me in the eyes, and said the words that changed everything. Enough crying, now we fight. We stayed up all night. Mama had gathered everything. Testimonies from former Aldridge employees. Financial documents that had accidentally been left in trash cans. Photos and records that painted a picture of a family built on lies. But the most important piece of evidence came from someone unexpected. Loretta Mae Jenkins. She'd been Francine's personal housekeeper for 22 years. She'd raised Marcus more than Francine ever did. Changed his diapers, helped with his homework, comforted him when he cried. She loved that boy like her own, and she hated what Francine had turned him into. I got something, Loretta told us over the phone that night. Her voice was shaky but determined. Something big. I've been holding on to it for years, waiting for the right time. I think the right time is now. She came over at midnight, carrying a shoebox wrapped in a plastic bag. What's this? I asked. Loretta set the box on Mama's kitchen table. Insurance. That's what Mrs. Aldridge always called it. She kept records of everything. Everyone she paid off. Every deal she made. Every secret she buried. She thought nobody knew about this box. But I clean her closets. I see everything. Inside were documents. Dozens of them. Bank statements showing payments to judges, politicians, business rivals. Records of bribes and cover-ups. Evidence of tax fraud, insurance fraud, and something even worse. A police report from 23 years ago. Buried and sealed, but Loretta had a copy. The report detailed an accident. A car crash that killed a young man named David Turner. The driver was a 19-year-old Marcus Aldridge. Marcus had been driving drunk. Hit David's car at an intersection. Killed him instantly. And Francine made it all disappear. She paid off the investigating officers, paid off David's family to stay quiet, got the records sealed, made sure her precious son never faced consequences. David Turner was 22 years old when he died. He was engaged to be married. He was going to be a father. I stared at that report, feeling sick to my stomach. "Does Marcus know?" I whispered. Loretta nodded slowly. "He knows. He's been living with it all these years. That's how Mrs. Aldridge controls him. She holds that over his head, tells him she saved him from prison, saved his life, and he owes her everything because of it." Suddenly, so much made sense. Marcus's inability to stand up to his mother, his drinking, which had gotten worse over the years, the way he sometimes stared into space with this haunted look in his eyes. He wasn't just weak, he was broken. But that didn't make what he'd done to me okay. That didn't excuse the affair, the lies, the plan to take my son. He'd made his choices. Now he'd face the consequences. We all would. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I organized everything. Created copies of every document. Sent backups to 3 different lawyers and a safety deposit box. Made sure that even if something happened to me, the truth would come out. By morning, I had a plan. The first call was to my divorce attorney, Margaret Chen. No relation to Victoria, thank God. Margaret was known as the Bulldog of Buckhead, a tiny woman with silver hair and absolutely zero tolerance for nonsense. I told her everything. Showed her everything. "Delilah," she said when I finished, This is extraordinary. We're not just talking divorce here. We're talking criminal charges, conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice. The Aldridge family could face serious prison time." "I don't care about prison," I said honestly. "I care about my son. I care about making sure Francine can never touch him again." "Then we have enough. More than enough." The second call was harder. I called David Turner's mother. She was 71 years old now, a widow living alone in Macon. When I told her who I was and why I was calling, the line went silent for so long I thought she'd hung up. "Mrs. Turner, are you there?" "I'm here," her voice cracked. "I've been waiting 23 years for this call. Knew it would come someday. Justice always finds a way." We talked for 2 hours. She told me about David, how he was kind and funny and wanted to be a teacher, how his fiancée never recovered from losing him, how she'd had to bury her only child, and then watch the person responsible walk free. "They paid us off," she admitted. "We were poor, honey. Couldn't afford lawyers. When they offered that money, we took it. Signed papers saying we'd keep quiet. I've been ashamed of that decision every day since." "It's not your fault," I told her. "They exploited you when you were grieving. That's what people like them do. What are you going to do now?" I took a deep breath. "I'm going to make them pay. Not for me. For David. For everyone they've hurt. And I want your permission to use what I know." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Baby, you got more than my permission. You got my blessing, my prayer, and my promise that if you need me to testify, I'll be there. That boy deserves justice, even if it's 23 years late." The third call was to a reporter. Angela Washington worked for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. She'd been investigating corruption among Atlanta's wealthy elite for years. When I reached out through a mutual contact, she agreed to meet immediately. We sat in a coffee shop in Decatur, me wearing sunglasses to hide my still healing burns. I laid out the basics without naming names at first. Fraud, bribery, a covered-up death, a powerful family using their influence to destroy anyone who got in their way. Angela listened with growing interest. "And you have documentation? Actual proof? Enough to bring down the whole house of cards? Why come to me? Why not just go to the police?" I thought about that question. I'd been asking myself the same thing. Because people like the Aldridges have connections everywhere. Police, judges, politicians. If I go through official channels, they'll find a way to bury it. Again. But if the story breaks publicly, if everyone knows, then they can't hide. Angela nodded slowly. "This is a big story. Biggest I've ever worked on. But I need time to verify everything. I won't publish anything that can't be proven." "I understand. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "When this breaks, make sure people know about David Turner. He deserves to be remembered." "I promise." We shook hands. And just like that, the wheels were in motion. While Angela investigated and verified, life continued. But things were different now. I moved out of the house in Marietta. Took Julian and went to stay with my mama. Marcus didn't fight me on it. I don't think he even noticed at first. He was too busy with Victoria. Too busy pretending everything was normal. But nothing was normal anymore. Julian asked questions, of course. Why weren't we at home? Where was Daddy? Why did Grandma Francine keep calling? I told him as much truth as a 6-year-old could handle. Mama and Daddy need some time apart right now. But I love you, and that will never change. He nodded solemnly. Is it because Grandma Francine is mean? Out of the mouths of babes. Something like that, sweetheart. I don't like her, he said quietly. She pretends to be nice, but her eyes are cold, like a snake. I hugged him tight. My boy was smarter than any of them realized. 2 weeks passed. My burns healed, though I'd have scars for life. The soup had left marks on my cheek and neck that no amount of cream would erase. But every time I looked in the mirror, I didn't see damage. I saw evidence. A permanent reminder of what that woman had done. Margaret Chen filed divorce papers during this time. She also filed for emergency full custody of Julian, citing domestic violence and evidence of conspiracy. Francine responded exactly as expected. She called, left messages, sent Marcus to talk sense into me, threatened lawsuits, tried everything short of physical intimidation. I ignored all of it. Then she made a mistake. A big one. She tried to pick Julian up from school. The school, following my strict instructions, refused to release him. Francine threw a fit in the main office, screamed at the secretary, threatened to sue the entire school district, finally had to be escorted out by security. The whole thing was caught on camera. Margaret added it to our evidence file with a grim smile. She's unraveling. That's good. Desperate people make mistakes. But I wasn't celebrating. Because I knew Francine well enough to know that when she got desperate, she got dangerous. The threatening letter arrived 3 days later. It came to my mama's house, addressed to me. Inside was a single sheet of expensive paper with typed words. Drop the divorce. Return Julian. Or face consequences you can't imagine. We know where your mother lives. We know where you work. We know everywhere you go. This is not a threat. This is a promise. No signature. But the paper had the Aldridge family watermark. I should have been scared. Maybe a normal person would have been. But I wasn't scared. I was angry. That's it, I said, showing the letter to Margaret. I'm done waiting. I want to accelerate everything. The divorce, the custody hearing, all of it. And I want to press charges for assault. For that soup. Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. I thought about David Turner. About his mother waiting 23 years for justice. About all the people Francine had crushed over the decades because nobody ever said no to her. I'm sure, Margaret nodded. Then let's burn it all down. The next few weeks were chaos. Beautiful, terrifying chaos. First, the assault charges. I went to the police with photos of my burns, medical records from the emergency room, and sworn statements from 3 people who'd witnessed the soup incident. One of them was Marcus's own cousin, Jennifer, who'd finally found the courage to speak up. I've watched Francine bully people my whole life, Jennifer told the detective. This was the worst thing I've ever seen her do. She didn't even hesitate. She just walked over and threw scalding soup at a woman sitting at a dinner table, like it was nothing. The police arrested Francine at her mansion, in front of her staff, in front of her neighbors, in front of the gardeners and the pool boy and everyone who'd spent years being afraid of her. The news covered it, of course. Buckhead, socialite, arrested for assault. The story spread like wildfire. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion about Francine Aldridge. And that was just the beginning. The day after her arrest, Angela's article dropped. It was a 3-part series titled The Aldridge Empire, Built on Lies, Buried in Secrets. Angela had done her homework. She'd verified every document, interviewed former employees, tracked down David Turner's family. The first part covered the business fraud, the failing dealerships, the cooked books, the investors who'd been misled for years. The second part covered the cover-up, David Turner's death, the bribed officials, the sealed records. The third part covered me, my marriage, the affair, the conspiracy to take my son, the soup. By the end of the week, the Aldridge name was poison. Investors pulled out. Business partners distanced themselves. The car dealership chain filed for bankruptcy. Politicians who'd taken Francine's money suddenly couldn't remember ever meeting her. And Marcus? Marcus disappeared. At first, I thought he'd run. Left the country, maybe. Gone somewhere nobody would find him. But then he showed up at my mama's door. It was late. Almost midnight. Julian was asleep. I heard the knock and looked through the peephole to see Marcus standing there, soaking wet from the rain. I opened the door but didn't let him in. "What do you want?" He looked terrible. Unshaved, eyes red, clothes wrinkled, like he hadn't slept in days. "I need to talk to you," he said. "Please, Delilah. Just give me 5 minutes." Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face, but another part, the part that had loved him once, hesitated. "5 minutes?" I said. "Out here on the porch." We stood in the rain together, and Marcus started talking. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I know that means nothing. I know I can't undo what I did, but I need you to know I'm sorry." "Sorry for what? For cheating? For lying? For letting your mother destroy our marriage? For trying to take my son?" "All of it!" Tears mixed with rainwater on his face. "Everything. I was weak. I've always been weak. After what happened with David." "I know about David." He froze. "I know everything, Marcus. The accident. The cover-up. How your mother holds it over you." He sagged like someone had cut his strings. "Then you know why I could never say no to her. Why I couldn't stand up. She saved me from prison, Delilah. She saved my life, and every day since, she's reminded me that I owe her everything." "That doesn't excuse what you did to me." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't. But I want you to understand. I never stopped loving you. Not really. I was just too scared to choose you over her." I stared at him, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Anger, certainly, but also something like pity. This man had never had a chance to become who he could have been. Francine had made sure of that. "What do you want, Marcus? Why are you really here?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is everything. Bank accounts, property deeds, the trust documents, all of it. I'm signing over full custody of Julian. I'm not going to fight you." I took the envelope, stunned. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. Because Julian deserves a mother who'll fight for him, not a father who is too cowardly to protect him. And because maybe, just maybe, if I do one good thing, it'll matter. I looked at the envelope, then back at him. "What are you going to do?" "Turn myself in. For David Turner. Tell the truth about what happened that night. It's time to stop running." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hate him forever. Part of me recognized that this man, broken as he was finally trying to do the right thing. "Julian loves you," I said finally. "Despite everything, he's going to need his father someday." Marcus smiled sadly. "Maybe. When I've paid for what I did. When I've earned the right to be in his life again." He turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, Delilah, you were always too good for me. Too good for all of us. I'm sorry I didn't see it until now." Then he walked away into the rain. I stood on that porch for a long time, holding the envelope, feeling the water soak through my clothes. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I cried. Not from sadness, exactly. From relief. From exhaustion. From the overwhelming weight of everything finally lifting. I didn't know if Marcus would actually turn himself in. I didn't know if Francine would go to prison. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew one thing for certain. I had won. Not with violence. Not with cruelty. But with truth. And patience. And the quiet strength of a woman who refused to be broken. Marcus did turn himself in. 3 days after that conversation on my mama's porch, he walked into the Atlanta Police Department and confessed to vehicular manslaughter in the death of David Turner. He told them everything. The accident, the cover-up, his mother's involvement, the bribes, all of it. The news exploded. Aldridge Air confesses to 2-3-year-old cover-up. The story was everywhere. Television, newspapers, social media. Everyone had something to say about the family that had fooled Atlanta's elite for decades. Mrs. Turner, David's mother, gave an interview. She sat in her small living room in Macon, surrounded by photos of her son, and spoke with quiet dignity. "My boy was stolen from me twice," she said. "First by that accident, then by people who had enough money to make the truth disappear. I've waited 23 years for someone to say his name, to acknowledge that David Turner existed, and that his life mattered. Today, finally, someone did." I watched that interview with tears streaming down my face. Justice. Real justice. Not the kind you buy with money or connections. The kind that comes from truth finally seeing daylight. Marcus was charged with vehicular manslaughter and leaving the scene of an accident. Because of the statute of limitations and his voluntary confession, his lawyers said he'd likely serve 3 to 5 years. Not enough, maybe, but something. Francine's situation was worse. Much worse. The assault charge from the soup incident was just the beginning. Once investigators started digging into the documents Loretta had provided, they found evidence of crimes spanning decades: bribery of public officials, tax evasion, insurance fraude, obstruction of justice, witness tampering. The FBI got involved, then the IRS, then the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Francine Aldridge, the queen of Buckhead society, became the target of a multi-agency investigation. Her lawyers tried everything. They argued the documents were stolen. They claimed Loretta was a disgruntled employee making false accusations. They painted me as a vengeful wife manufacturing evidence. None of it worked. Francine was denied bail after prosecutors argued she was a flight risk. She had the resources to disappear, they said. Private jets, international connections, hidden accounts. The judge agreed. So Francine Aldridge, the woman who'd thrown soup in my face and told me I deserved it, sat in a county jail cell awaiting trial. No designer clothes, no personal chef, no staff to order around. Just a concrete room and a cot and all the time in the world to think about what she'd done. I visited her once. I don't know why I went. Curiosity, maybe. Or the need to see with my own eyes that she was really there, that this wasn't some dream I'd wake up from. They brought her into the visitation room in an orange jumpsuit. Her silver hair, always so perfectly styled, hung limp and gray around her face. She'd aged 10 years in the weeks since her arrest. The confident, commanding woman who'd terrorized me for years looked small, diminished, human. She sat across from me, separated by thick glass. And for a long moment, neither of us spoke. "Come to gloat?" she finally asked. Her voice was hoarse, nothing like the smooth, cultured tone I remembered. "No," I said honestly. "I came to understand." "Understand what?" "Why you hated me so much. From the very beginning, before I ever did anything to you." "Why?" Francine laughed bitterly. "You really don't know?" "No, I don't." She leaned forward, her eyes meeting mine through the glass, and for the first time, I saw something real in them. Something raw. "Because you had everything I never did." I stared at her, confused. "Everything?" "I grew up poor, Francine. My mama cleaned your friends' houses. I had nothing." "You had freedom," she said quietly. "You had choices. You became a nurse because you wanted to help people. You married my son because you loved him. Everything you did because you chose to. Not because someone told you to. Not because it was expected. Not because you'd lose everything if you didn't." She sat back, her expression tired. "I was born into this life, Delilah. The expectations, the obligations, the constant performance. I married Harold because our families arranged it. I raised Marcus the way I was told to. I spent 50 years being exactly what everyone expected me to be, and I hated every moment of it. So you took it out on me?" "I took it out on everyone, but especially you, because you reminded me of what I could have been. If I'd been braver, if I'd been stronger, if I'd said no just once." I sat with that for a moment. I hadn't expected vulnerability from Francine, hadn't expected anything close to honesty. "That doesn't excuse what you did," I said finally. "No, it doesn't. You tried to take my son. You planned to destroy my life. You threw boiling soup in my face." "Yes, and you covered up a young man's death so your son wouldn't face consequences." Francine's face crumpled. For a moment, she looked like she might cry. "David Turner," she whispered. "I see his face every night. I've seen it for 23 years. That boy's death is the worst thing I've ever done. And I've done terrible things." "Why?" I pressed. "Why did you cover it up? Marcus was 19. He would have faced consequences, sure, but he wouldn't have been destroyed. Because I couldn't let my son go to prison. I couldn't let our name be ruined. I couldn't." She trailed off, shaking her head. "I couldn't admit that I'd failed, that I'd raised a boy who made a mistake that killed someone. It was easier to make it disappear." Easier for who? Not for David's mother. Not for Marcus, who's carried that guilt for over 2 decades. "I know," Francine's voice broke. "I know. I told myself I was protecting him. But really, I was protecting myself. My image. My control. And in doing so, I destroyed him. I destroyed everything." We sat in silence for a long moment. Then Francine looked at me with something almost like respect. "You're stronger than me, Delilah. You always were. You stood up when I tried to push you down. You fought when I expected you to run. You burned down everything I built with nothing but the truth." "I didn't do it for revenge," I said. "I did it for my son, and for David Turner, and for everyone you hurt along the way." "I know. That's what makes you better than me. I did everything for myself. You did everything for others." She stood up slowly, the chains on her wrists clinking. A guard approached to take her back to her cell. "Francine," I said before she left. She turned. "I forgive you." Her eyes widened. For a moment, the mask slipped completely, and I saw surprise. Real, genuine surprise. Why? Because holding on to hatred is exhausting. Because my mama taught me that bitterness only poisons the person carrying it. And because, despite everything you did, you're still a human being who made choices she regrets. Francine's lips trembled. "I don't deserve forgiveness. Probably not. But I'm giving it anyway. Not for you. For me. So I can move on. So I can raise my son without this weight on my heart." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she nodded once, slowly. "Take care of Julian," she said quietly. "He's a good boy. Better than any of us deserved." "I will." The guard led her away. I watched her shuffle down the hall in her orange jumpsuit, and I felt something shift inside me. The anger I'd been carrying for so long began to loosen its grip. Not disappear entirely. Some wounds take years to heal. But loosen. I walked out of that jail into the afternoon sunlight and took a deep breath. The air tasted sweeter somehow. Lighter. It was time to start living again. The divorce was finalized 2 months later. Thanks to the documents Marcus had given me, the proceedings were straightforward. I got full custody of Julian. I got the house in Marietta, which I immediately sold. I got a settlement that wasn't huge by Aldridge standards, but was more money than I'd ever had in my life. Enough to start over. Enough to build something new. I used some of it to buy a small house in Decatur, close to my mama's place. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Really mine. My name on the deed. My decisions about everything from the paint colors to the furniture. Julian loved it. He picked out the color for his room, a bright blue like the sky. He helped me plant flowers in the front yard. He made friends with the kids next door and spent hours playing in the backyard I'd never been able to give him before. "Mama," he said one evening as I tucked him into bed, "I like our new house." "Yeah? Why's that?" He thought about it seriously, the way he always did. "Because it feels happy here. Our old house was pretty, but it felt cold, like nobody really lived there." I kissed his forehead. "You're a smart kid, you know that?" "I know," he said with a grin. I laughed and turned off his light, feeling a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. We were going to be okay. More than okay. My mama came over almost every day in those first few months. She helped me unpack boxes, hung curtains, argued with me about where to put the couch. Normal things. Beautiful, ordinary things. One afternoon, we sat on my back porch drinking sweet tea and watching Julian chase fireflies in the yard. "You did good, baby," Mama said quietly. "Real good. I couldn't have done it without you." "Sure you could have. You're stronger than you know. Always have been. I leaned my head on her shoulder like I used to when I was little. You think Daddy would be proud? My father had passed when I was 16. Cancer took him quick. Too quick for us to prepare. But I still thought about him every day. Oh, honey. Mama's voice thickened with emotion. Your daddy would be bursting with pride. He always said you were going to do something special. Something that mattered. This isn't exactly what he had in mind, I'm sure. No, but standing up for yourself? Fighting for your child? Refusing to let rich folks push you around? That's exactly what he would have wanted. He spent his whole life being told to know his place. You showed them the only place that matters is the one you make for yourself. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the fireflies blink in the gathering darkness. And I thought about all the places I'd been. The cramped apartment of my childhood. The hospital rooms where I'd worked endless shifts. The Aldridge mansion where I'd felt so small. This little house in Decatur where I finally felt like me. What a journey. What a strange, painful, beautiful journey. The trials happened over the next year. Marcus went first. His confession made things simpler. He pleaded guilty to vehicular manslaughter and obstruction of justice. The judge gave him 4 years, with possibility of parole after 2 for good behavior. I took Julian to visit him once, about 6 months after the sentencing. I wasn't sure it was the right thing to do, but Julian had been asking about his daddy, and I didn't want to be the kind of mother who kept her child from knowing his father. Marcus looked different in his prison uniform. Older, but also somehow younger. Like a weight had been lifted. Julian sat across from him in the visitation room. Uncertain at first. Hey, buddy, Marcus said softly. You've gotten so big. I'm in 2nd grade now, Julian offered. 2nd grade? Wow, you must be really smart. Mama says I am. Marcus smiled sadly. Your mama's right. She usually is. They talked for an hour. About school, about Julian's friends, about the dog I'd finally let him adopt. Normal father-son stuff. And watching them, I realized something. Marcus had done terrible things. He'd hurt me in ways that would take years to fully heal. But he was still Julian's father. And that relationship, whatever it became, wasn't mine to destroy. Some people might think I was weak for that, for letting Marcus be part of Julian's life after everything. But I didn't see it as weakness. I saw it as giving my son the chance to know his father, flaws and all, and make his own judgments when he was old enough. Besides, Marcus was trying, really trying. He'd enrolled in counseling programs, started attending AA meetings, written letters to David Turner's mother, apologies that could never be enough but were something. He'd never be the man I married. That man had been an illusion anyway. But maybe, just maybe, he could become something better. Francine's trial was a circus. The media covered every moment. Cameras outside the courthouse, reporters shoving microphones at anyone connected to the case. Opinion pieces analyzing everything from her wardrobe choices to her facial expressions. I testified, sat in that witness chair and told the truth about everything. The years of subtle abuse, the campaign to push me out of my own family, the conspiracy to take my son, the soup. Francine's lawyers tried to paint me as bitter, vengeful, unreliable. They implied I'd manufactured evidence, manipulated witnesses, orchestrated the whole thing out of spite. The jury didn't buy it. They found her guilty on 12 counts. Assault, bribery, obstruction of justice, tax fraud, conspiracy. The judge sentenced her to 15 years in federal prison. 15 years. She'd be in her 80s when she got out. If she got out. When the verdict was read, I expected to feel something. Triumph, maybe. Satisfaction. Justice finally served. Instead, I just felt tired and a little sad. Because Francine Aldridge, for all her cruelty, was still a human being. A human being who'd made terrible choices and would spend the rest of her life paying for them. There was nothing triumphant about that. Nothing to celebrate. Just consequences. Finally catching up. I left the courthouse that day and drove straight to my mama's house. She had Julian there, feeding him homemade cookies and helping with his homework. How did it go? She asked quietly. It's over, I said. It's really over. Mama hugged me tight. Julian came running over and hugged my legs. And standing there in that small kitchen, surrounded by love, I finally let myself believe it. The storm had passed. The sky was clearing. And ahead of us, nothing but open road. Life settled into something beautiful after that. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and good and mine. I went back to nursing. Not in a hospital this time. I opened a small clinic in my neighborhood serving families who couldn't afford fancy health care. The settlement money helped with the startup costs, and grants covered the rest. Every day, I went to work and helped people. Vaccinated babies, treated infections, held hands with scared parents, and explained things in words they could understand. It was the work I'd always wanted to do. Meaningful work. Work that mattered. Julian thrived. He was smart and kind and curious about everything. He asked 1,000 questions a day and actually listened to the answers. He made friends easily, but also knew how to be alone. He laughed freely and cried when he needed to and wasn't ashamed of either one. I watched him grow and thought about all the things Francine had wanted for him. The prestigious schools, the country clubs, the proper upbringing. None of that mattered. What mattered was that my son knew he was loved, that he felt safe, that he could become whoever he wanted to be without someone trying to mold him into something else. Cornelius, Clementina's grandfather from the competitor script, reminded me of someone I met during this whole ordeal. His name was Walter Freeman, an old man who'd worked at the Aldridge dealership for 40 years. He'd watched the families rise and fall, seen everything. After the trials, he reached out to me. We had coffee, and he told me stories about the early days, when Harold Aldridge was just a young man with a dream of building something, before the money changed everything. The thing about wealth, Walter said thoughtfully, is it don't change who you are. It just reveals it. If you're generous, you become more generous. If you're cruel, you become more cruel. Francine was always scared, I think. Scared of losing what she had. And that fear made her do terrible things. I thought about that a lot. Fear. So much damage caused by fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being seen as weak. I'd been afraid, too, once. Afraid of Francine. Afraid of losing my son. Afraid of standing up for myself because I didn't think I was worth fighting for. But I'd learned something important through all of this. Fear doesn't go away. You just learn to act despite it. To choose courage even when your hands are shaking and your voice is trembling and every part of you wants to run. That's what being brave really means. Not the absence of fear, the presence of action. 2 years after everything ended, I met someone. His name was Thomas. He worked as a carpenter, owned a small business restoring old houses. We met at a community fundraiser for my clinic. He donated his time building us a new waiting room. Thomas was nothing like Marcus. Quiet where Marcus was charming. Steady where Marcus was unpredictable. He listened more than he talked. He showed up when he said he would. He didn't try to impress me with money or status. He just was. Our first date was coffee at a little shop near my clinic. We talked for 3 hours and barely noticed the time passing. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "Where do I start?" "Wherever you want." So I told him. All of it. The marriage, the divorce, Francine, the trials, everything. I figured if he was going to run, better he run now than later. He didn't run. When I finished, he sat quietly for a moment. Then he said, "That's a lot to carry." Yeah, it was. "You seem lighter now, though. Like you've put some of it down." I smiled. "I'm working on it." "Good." He reached across the table and took my hand. Everyone deserves to put their burdens down sometimes. We took things slow. Real slow. I had Julian to think about, and I wasn't about to bring anyone into his life who wasn't going to stick around. But Thomas was patient. He understood. He never pushed, never rushed, never made me feel like I had to be anything other than exactly who I was. Julian liked him immediately. They bonded over building things, spent hours in the garage constructing birdhouses and shelves, and a treehouse that became Julian's favorite place in the world. "Mama," Julian said one evening, about a year into my relationship with Thomas, "is Thomas going to be my stepdad?" I looked at my son, so grown up already, so perceptive. "Would that be okay with you?" He thought about it seriously. "Yeah, I think so. He makes you smile. You didn't smile much before, but now you smile all the time. Out of the mouths of babes. Thomas and I got married the following spring. A small ceremony in my mama's backyard. Just family and close friends. No fancy venue, no designer dress. Just love and promises and the people who mattered most. Julian was the ring bearer. My mama walked me down the aisle. And when Thomas said I do, I felt something I'd never felt in my first marriage. Certainty. Not certainty that everything would be perfect. Life doesn't work that way. But certainty that I'd chosen well this time. That this man would stand beside me through whatever came. That we were partners, equals, teammates in every sense of the word. After the ceremony, my mama pulled me aside. Your daddy would have loved him, she said, tears in her eyes. You think so? I know so. He would have said, that's a man who knows how to treat a woman. Hold on to that one. I laughed through my own tears. I planned to. The years passed. Julian grew from a boy to a teenager to a young man. He had his father's eyes, but his mama's heart. He visited Marcus in prison. Then, after Marcus got out, maintained a careful relationship with him. Not close, but not closed off either. They were finding their way. Marcus never remarried. Never went back to the dealership business. He got a job as a mechanic at a small shop in Midtown. Simple work, honest work. The kind of work that doesn't require pretending to be something you're not. We weren't friends, exactly. But we weren't enemies either. We were two people who'd hurt each other and were trying to do better. For Julian's sake, and maybe for our own. Francine died in prison when Julian was 16. Heart attack, they said. She'd been inside for almost a decade by then. No one from the family attended her funeral except Marcus. I didn't feel sad when I heard the news. But I didn't feel happy either. I just felt finished. Like a chapter had finally closed. Mrs. Turner passed around the same time. I'd stayed in touch with her over the years, visiting when I could, calling on David's birthday. She became a kind of honorary grandmother to Julian, and he became like the grandson she'd never had. Before she died, she gave me a photo of David. A young man with kind eyes and an easy smile. Keep this, she said. Remember him. That's all I ever wanted. For someone to remember. I hung that photo in my clinic waiting room. Underneath it, I put a small plaque. In memory of David Turner, your life mattered. Every day, patients asked about it. And every day, I told them the story. Not the whole story, just enough. A young man who died too soon. A truth that was hidden for decades. Justice that came late but finally came. Because stories matter. They remind us who we've been and who we can be. They connect us to people we've never met and times we never lived through. They teach us that even in the darkest moments, there's always hope. My story isn't special. Not really. It's just one among millions. A woman who was hurt and fought back. A family that crumbled under the weight of its own lies. A child who grew up loved despite everything. But it's mine. And I'm proud of it. Now I'm 52 years old. Julian is grown, working as a social worker, helping kids in foster care. Thomas and I just celebrated our 15th anniversary. My mama's still kicking, 83 years old and sharp as ever. Still telling me what to do even though I'm a grown woman with gray in my hair. Some mornings I sit on my porch with my coffee and think about everything that brought me here, the pain and the joy, the loss and the gain. The moments I wanted to give up, and the moments I'm so glad I didn't. And I remember what my mama used to say when she braided my hair at night. Delilah, you're gonna do better than this. You're gonna have a life I couldn't give you. But remember where you came from. Remember who raised you, and never let nobody make you feel small. I did remember. Through everything I remembered. And now, sitting on this porch, watching the sun rise over a life I built with my own two hands, I know something for certain. I'm not small. I never was. I'm a woman who stood up when the world told her to sit down, who spoke truth when silence would have been easier, who chose love over bitterness, courage over fear, dignity over defeat. And if my story helps even one person believe they can do the same, then every tear was worth it. Every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, Because we're all stronger than we know. We all have more courage than we think. And no matter how dark things get, the light always finds a way through. Sometimes through cracks we didn't even know existed. I still have the stoneware mug I've been drinking from for years. Nothing fancy, just old ceramic with a faded floral pattern. It's chipped now, stained from decades of coffee, but it's mine. And every morning when I wrap my hands around it, I remember who I am. A woman who came from nothing and built something beautiful. A mother who fought for her child and won. A person who learned that the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's living well, living true, living free. That afternoon when Francine threw hot soup in my face changed everything. She meant it to break me, to humiliate me, to show me once and for all that I was nothing. Instead, it woke me up, reminded me of the fire that had always burned inside me, just waiting for a reason to blaze. And when I made that phone call, when I said those 3 words, "It's time," I wasn't just starting a fight. I was claiming my life back. So here I am, 52 years old, scars on my face that have faded but never quite disappeared, a husband who loves me, a son who makes me proud every day, a clinic full of patients who need me, a mama who's still my biggest fan, and a heart that's finally at peace. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.